In this video, I will rank every CRPG I have fully completed. Not only finished, but 100%ed. Every quest, every ending, every companion arc, every achievement. Some of these games made that effort feel worthwhile, others turned it into a chore. This list focuses on which games hold up when you commit to seeing every single thing. Each title is judged on 6 main criteria: narrative depth, combat design, exploration, role-playing flexibility, writing quality, and of course, how satisfying the full completion experience was. Now with all of that said and done, let's get nerdy. Encased opens strong. The concept is great, the setting is weird in all the right ways, and the first few hours hint to a Fallout-style experience with teeth. But once you start chasing 100%, the cracks really start to show fast. Quests dead end without payoff, companion depth is barely there, and the deeper you go, the more it feels like the game forgot what it's trying to be. Combat is uninspired, the systems are there but they lack finesse, progression feels quite arbitrary, builds converge too quickly, worse still, the pacing is absolutely dreadful. Long walks, dull detours, and exposition that goes absolutely nowhere. It all adds up. And then there's the achievement design. Vague, punitive, and overly reliant on untelegraphed early game choices. It is the kind of list that forces multiple playthroughs not because it's interesting, but because it's poorly planned. There are moments here that shine, mostly in world building and atmosphere, but they are buried under design that actively resists the player. At number 23 on this list, Encased sits where it does because it's a decent idea dragged down by execution that cannot carry a full completion run. If Encased crumbled under small ambitions, Kingmaker falters under massive ones. This is a CRPG that wants to be a whole tabletop campaign in a single box. It almost gets there also. The class systems are ridiculously deep, the map is sprawling, and the story branches wide. But as a completionist experience, it's one of the most punishing on this list. Kingdom management is the core problem. It is not optional, it's not intuitive, and if you mess it up, you can lose access to quests or entire story arcs. It turns the endgame into a calendar micromanagement sim that adds little but stress. Combat offers genuine tactical depth, but it is surrounded by bugs, poor encounter design, and a difficulty curve that spikes widely. You either overpower everything or get shredded by status effects you cannot counter without obscure meta knowledge. Narrative quality varies. Some companions are quite excellent, others are quite flat, and the main plot stretches far too thin by the final act. There's a great game buried in here, but 100% completing it is a test of endurance, not insight. That lands Kingmaker at rank 22. It's ambitious, deep, but often miserable to finish. Solasta Crown of the Magister is fast, focused, and fundamentally sound. It does not reach for the stars like Kingmaker, but it does hit its tactical marks with confidence. The game is built around a faithful D&D 5e combat engine, and it uses that system well. If you enjoy turn-based dungeon crawling with solid tactical options, this one delivers. From a completionist perspective though, it is surprisingly accessible. The achievement list is clear, the campaign is compact, and most builds are viable. But the trade-off is that Solasta lacks narrative weight. Companions do not evolve over time. Roleplay choices rarely matter. Exploration is linear, and story beats are fairly thin. Combat is the main event, and to the game's credit, it's absolutely excellent. Positioning, elevation, spell prep, it all matters. And that makes moment-to-moment gameplay feel engaging even when the story does not. What drags Solasta down is how little there is outside of the combat loop, rather than a living space. Side quests are functional but forgettable. That earns it the 21st spot on this list. A decent game for system heads, but not one that rewards full completion in any meaningful narrative or role-playing way. Wasteland 2 marks a pivotal moment in the CRPG revival. It came before Pillars, before Original Sin, and reminded a lot of people why the genre mattered in the first place. From a historical standpoint, it is quite important. For a completionist standpoint, it's quite rough. The core of the game is solid enough. You build a squad, explore ruined America, and solve problems with guns, words, or explosions depending on how you spec. The world has character. Some zones are genuinely fun to dig into, but the systems holding it together are inconsistent, and over time the seams really start to show. Quest logic is brittle. You can softlock progress or break narrative continuity without even realizing it. Dialogue trees often give you the illusion of choice without follow-through. Combat is overly reliant on single strategies, and encounters become repetitive long before the game is done. From a completionist perspective, the time investment just is not worth it. The achievements are grinding and often unrewarding. Exploration rarely leads to new gameplay, just more text or filler loot. It is a game that drags when it should ramp up. The Shadowrun series never aimed to compete with giants like Divinity or Pillars, but it carved out a nice space with tight urban stories and accessible mechanics. Of the three mainline games, Hong Kong is the most polished in presentation, but arguably the least compelling to 100% complete. The setting is excellent, a cyberpunk fantasy Hong Kong filled with triads, rogue AIs, and corporate ghosts. The writing is solid across the board, and the companions are likable, if not as deep as they could be. Where it falters is in how static everything feels. Dialogue trees branch but rarely matter. Outcomes change flavor but not structure. Combat is straightforward. It works, but there is very little evolution or build flexibility. The same tactics that worked for the first mission work for the final boss fight. That makes the game feel increasingly flat on a second or completionist run. Achievements are fine, most are straightforward, a few require specific dialogue options or ending triggers that are easy to miss, but nothing egregious. The real issue here is the repetition. Once you've done one arc, there is little incentive to do more. No mechanical surprises, no new strategies, just more text. Torment, Tides of Numenera is often described as the spiritual successor to Planescape, and in some respects, it earns that title. The setting is bizarre and imaginative, the writing is dense and philosophical, and the game leans so heavily into narrative over combat that entire playthroughs can be done non-violently. That is bold, but bold does not mean effective. The biggest issue is that choices often feel circular in nature. You make a decision, you get a big text dump, and then the outcome feels disconnected from the choice you made. That works once or twice. Over 30 hours, it becomes exhausting. Combat is rare but also quite shallow, unfortunately, with encounters that are sparse and the turn-based system that lacks bite. There is very little build diversity, where characters feel locked into roles. The interface is quite clunky, the game wants to avoid combat, but it also fails to make dialogue-based resolution consistently satisfying. 100%ing is a test of patience. You will need to replay the game multiple times to see different narrative outcomes, but most of them offer only superficial variation. Companion arcs end abruptly, and the final act rushes through what should be the game's true payoff. It's not that it's bad, but it's bloated and inconsistent. And at number 18, Numenera is admirable, but quite hard to recommend for anyone chasing full completion. Of the modern Shadowrun games, Dragonfall is the standout. It's the one most people remember. It has the best characters, the most developed story, and the clearest sense of stakes. From a narrative standpoint, it's a real step up from Hong Kong, and from a completionist perspective, it's also a more rewarding game to dig into, but it still has limits. The companion writing is genuinely strong. Dietrich, Glory, Eiger, each one gets a solid arc, and most of them tie directly into the main story beat. Quests have multiple outcomes, and while the mechanical reactivity isn't huge, the narrative tone of your decisions shifts meaningfully. Combat is mostly unchanged from Returns, turn-based, cover-focused, prone to repetition. Some builds are stronger than others, but there's enough flexibility to keep it from feeling completely stale. Where it falters is enemy variety. Late game encounters start to blur together and boss fights lack tactical complexity. The structure is its strength. It's tight, no wasted space. The runtime respects your investment and the achievement design supports a single thorough playthrough. For a smaller budget title, that's no small feat. At number 17, Dragonfall sits above its sibling titles because it knows what it is and delivers confidently. But when compared to the genre's heavy hitters, its simplicity starts to show. There's a lot of historical value in Wasteland. Well, if you think about it, it laid the groundwork for Fallout, for post-apocalyptic branching RPGs, even for squad-based decision-making games. The remaster aims to bring that legacy back with a fresh coat of paint and a functional interface. But this is, without a doubt, unequivocally a game of its time. Narrative content is minimal. You are dropped into the desert, given vague objectives, and left to sort things out. That works if you like emergent gameplay and filling the gaps with your imagination. It does not work for completionists chasing clean quest lines or well-paced story arcs. Combat is rigid and dated, encounters boil down to raw number crunching, and progression is quite awkward. Skills don't scale cleanly, weapons have huge RNG variance, and there are entire systems that are barely explained, if at all. The real killer is information. The game expects you to take notes, track obscure clues, and remember conversations from 15 hours ago. Some achievement requirements feel like they were designed for players with printed manuals and graph paper. That lands it at number 16. It is a curiosity, a piece of genre history even, and while finishing it can feel satisfying from a historical perspective, there's little here that stands up to the modern standards of roleplay or reward design. It is easy to forget how lean the original Fallout actually was. The world was small by modern standards, but it also was quite sharp, reactive, and absolutely packed with consequence. From a narrative perspective, this game still punches above its weight. The choices you make feel immediate. The branching paths are real, and for the time it was released, it was doing things no other RPG had even attempted. The challenge is in how much it respects your time, or rather how much it doesn't. Combat is clunky and slow, the AP system is fine, but the UI responsiveness and pathfinding are quite rough. There is also a lot of binary fail states tied to skill checks, with no clear way to respec or adapt on the fly. If you lock yourself out of a solution, the game does not care. It moves on without you. From a completionist view, it's surprisingly manageable. The map is small, side quests are contained, but finishing everything means doing a full Karma Spectrum run and keeping detailed notes on what can trigger them. The payoff is worth it, but the process demands care. At number 15 on this list, Fallout earns respect for what it started and for how reactive it still feels, but the friction around its systems and the effort needed to see it all holds it back from greatness. Icewind Dale is what happens when the Infinity Engine stops caring about narrative choices and leans entirely into combat and dungeon design. If Baldur's Gate is the adventuring party simulator, Icewind Dale is the tactical combat module. It does not pretend to be reactive, it's not trying to deliver a rich narrative experience, it just wants to throw you into a gauntlet after gauntlet and see if your builds can survive. And honestly, it's great at that. For a combat-focused CRPG, the encounter design is top tier. Enemy compositions are tricky, buff and debuff management matters. Spell strategy evolves from zone to zone, and because you create your entire party from scratch, there's room to experiment with min-maxed weirdness that most games do not allow. Where it stumbles, and the reason it sits at number 14, is that once you step outside of combat, there isn't much to do. Towns can be lifeless, dialogue is sparse, and there are companions, technically, but they have zero personality. Exploration is just a means to reach the next encounter, and that gets old quite quickly. From a 100% standpoint, the achievement list is quite straightforward and there's no bloat. But completing the game feels clinical rather than rewarding. There's no grand narrative closure, just another boss, another tomb, and another ice cave. The original Divinity Original Sin was Larian's breakthrough moment. It took a risk on a turn-based combat system, embraced co-op, and dropped players into a world full of charm and chaos. It is a smart, strange, and at times wildly unbalanced RPG, and for all of its flaws, there is still something special here, especially if you're willing to meet the game on its terms. Combat is the absolute star. Even in its early form, the elemental interactions are clever and the battlefield setups encourage creativity. You can electrify water, ignite poison, or trap enemies in webs while teleporting your tank across the map. It rewards experimentation even when the math gets a little janky. Narrative structure is where the cracks start to show. The story is scattered, the tone is inconsistent, and while there are memorable quests, many feel like side content that got promoted to mainline due to a lack of pacing. Companions are barely there, and the world feels like a sandbox rather than a living space. For completionists, the Enhanced Edition makes a big difference. The achievement list is cleaner, systems are more stable, and the endgame content flows better. But the original release, which this ranking reflects, can be messy with broken quest flags and opaque progression steps. At number 13, Original Sin is a smart game that gets by on ambition and system design. It's the prototype for what Larian Studios would perfect the next time out. If the original Pillars was Obsidian's tribute to Baldur's Gate, Deadfire is their attempt to modernize that legacy. It expands the scope, tightens the combat, fully voices the cast, and gives players a literal ship to sail across the massive archipelago. The result is a game that feels huge, almost too huge, and that ambition is what defines its place on this list. Narratively, the game is solid. Eothas as a central threat works, even if his presence remains oddly distant. Companion writing is strong, especially with characters like Maya and Zoti, and faction politics are genuinely reactive. There are real decisions to be made here, and they lock out content in meaningful ways. Combat is vastly improved from the first game. Multi-classing, subclasses, and expanded AI behavior settings give you serious control over how fights play out. It is dense but learnable. Boss designs is better, encounters feel varied, and builds actually matter. The issue here is bloat. There is too much crap, too much map, too much filler, too much ship combat that adds absolutely nothing. 100%ing Deadfire means dragging yourself through dozens of identical islands just to check a box. It wears you down. That lands it at number 12, a beautiful, smart, and reactive game that is ultimately weighed down by the content it didn't need. Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader is easily one of the boldest CRPGs in recent memory. Owlcat swung for the fences with this one, adapting the 40k universe into a fully fledged, choice-driven, party-based epic. And for the most part, they pulled it off. The setting is brutal, the writing is surprisingly sharp, and the level of player agency is among the highest on this list. From a completionist standpoint though, the same ambition becomes its biggest obstacle. Let's start with the good. Narrative branching is excellent. Major decisions lock or unlock entire quest lines. Party members can live, die, turn against you, or even ascend to godhood depending on your choices. There are multiple endings, moral axes, and faction resolutions. It is complex, reactive, and often surprising. Combat is solid, but at times uneven. The turn-based system leans into spectacle over nuance. It is fun to nuke a squad with a plasma cannon, but over time fights get repetitive. There are balance issues, and some difficulty spikes feel artificial, and AI quirks can be frequent. Where it struggled the most, especially during the launch period, was its technical stability. Bugs, quest blockers, and dialogue misfires were quite common, especially in late game content. And for a 100% run, that is a major problem. Achievements tied to branching outcomes require multiple full playthroughs, and the game is not exactly short. At number 11, Rogue Trader is ambitious and deeply replayable, but until it was fully polished, completionists should have been prepared for quite a turbulent ride. Fallout 2 builds on everything the original introduced and dials it all up another notch. Bigger world, more factions, more companions, and significantly more ways to break the game in half. In many ways, it's the ideal sequel. It expands the scope without losing the tone, adds more reactivity, and makes the post-apocalypse feel genuinely lived in. From a completionist perspective though, it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, the game is overflowing with content, side quests that go deep, towns react to your reputation, dialogues change based on your stats, perks, and previous actions. Some of the funniest and darkest moments in the series are buried in the optional content, and if you're thorough, you'll find them all. On the other hand, Fallout 2 is riddled with legacy jank. Quest logic can break if you don't do things in a specific order, important flags are never communicated, and you might lose access to quest lines without knowing they ever happened. The companion system is also quite clumsy. Party members run on outdated AI and need to be micromanaged constantly. Achievements aren't an issue here, but fully completing the game means tracking dozens of storylines, maintaining a clean karma run, and knowing which ending requires which invisible trigger. It is doable, it is satisfying, but at times it also feels like work. That puts Fallout 2 comfortably at number 10, a game that delivers on its promise, as long as you're willing to wrestle with it. You can actually tangibly feel the age on the original Baldur's Gate, but you can also feel its ambition. This is the foundation of the Infinity Engine era, and it still carries a kind of charm and clarity that later games sometimes lose in their complexity. From a completionist standpoint, it's a quite straightforward experience, but one with real structure and weight behind it. The narrative is linear but functional. Saravok is a great antagonist, and the journey from Candlekeep to the final confrontation feels purposeful. Side quests are sprinkled across the world map, and while they are rarely reactive, they are consistent. Towns have texture, dungeons have payoff, and everything feels like it is where it belongs. Combat is basic. Low-level D&D 2nd edition is not kind. You will miss a lot, but the difficulty curve is fair, and once you learn the rhythm, it becomes manageable. Companion variety is strong, even if personal quests are limited. 100%ing Baldur's Gate is refreshingly clean. The enhanced edition smooths out some rough edges. The quest journal is workable. You're not fighting the UI, just the dice. There's a sense of finality to the experience that many modern CRPGs lack. And at number 9, Baldur's Gate is here because it knows what it wants to be. It's focused, it's well paced, and it still feels rewarding to fully complete decades after release. There are games on this list with better combat, cleaner interfaces, and more polished pacing, but none of them come close to what Planescape Torment does with narrative. It's a game obsessed with identity, memory, morality, and meaning, and somehow it explores all of that through dialogue trees and a corpse with tattoos on his back. That is impressive. What's more impressive is that it holds up today. From a completionist perspective, Torment is dense. Dialogue choices unlock content, attributes and alignments affect everything from available quests to how characters respond to you. Entire story arcs can be missed with the wrong response. Getting 100% therefore means rerunning conversations, exhausting every branch, and digging into every obscure corner of Sigil and beyond. It is not fast, but it is worth it. Combat is the weak point though. It's clunky, uninspired, and largely skippable. Most builds work, but nothing feels great. Thankfully, the game lets you bypass many encounters if you're smart about dialogue and stats. The world is a bizarre one in the best way possible. You will meet talking skulls, insane gods, sentient tattoos, and death cults who ask politely before killing you. It's a fascinating world to explore. Even minor side quests can contain profound writing or pitch black humor. At number 8, Torment earns its place not for its mechanics, but for how powerfully it delivers on narrative completion. There is nothing else quite like it on this list. Wasteland 3 is everything that Wasteland 2 wanted to be but couldn't quite reach. It tightens up the combat, sharpens the dialogue, and improves reactivity. It even trims the fat from the bloated formula. The result? A cold, violent, and often hilarious post-apocalyptic romp through Colorado, one that is most remarkably satisfying to complete. Narrative choices actually matter this time. Major decisions ripple across the world. Factions react to your actions. Companions get involved in moral debates, and you will find yourself locked out of content based on earlier choices. That's not just flavor, that's consequence, and it makes 100%ing the game a genuine challenge. Combat is vastly improved. The tactical layer has some real depth, with build variety being strong and perks feeling impactful. Enemy encounters escalate naturally, and there's a decent balance between combat, exploration, and downtime. What pushes Wasteland 3 this high is its tone. It's a hard thing to get right, but the game finds space for absurdist humor, bleak horror, and grounded character moments without feeling scattered. You can wipe out entire towns, rescue cultists, negotiate with cannibals, or even parlay with a robotic Ronald Reagan. And somehow it all feels quite coherent. Achievements are well designed, completion requires different morality paths and a few second runs, but nothing feels excessive or punishing. That lands Wasteland 3 at number 7 on my list, a game that respects your time and pays off your investment. Disco Elysium is not a traditional CRPG, but it absolutely belongs on this list. There are no party members to manage, no loot to chase, no traditional combat to master. Instead, you get a detective, a murder, a fractured mind, and a city that reflects every decision. It is dense, literally, and brutally self-aware. From a completionist angle, it is one of the most rewarding games here, and one of the hardest to 100%. The core mechanic is dialogue, and everything flows from it. Your stats are personalities. Your failures shape your character, and every interaction pushes you toward or away from a dozen possible outcomes. No two playthroughs are the same, and getting everything means seeing it from multiple psychological angles. The achievement list reflects exactly that. Some require you to fail spectacularly, others demand deep understanding of how internal monologues and story events unlock. It's not exactly intuitive, but it is fascinating. The game actively rewards curiosity and punishes complacency. The writing is next level. It is dense without being pretentious. It is funny, painful, and smart, and often in the same sentence. And it treats your time with respect. Every side quest means something. Every choice closes a door and opens another. At number 6, Disco Elysium is a masterclass in narrative design. It is lean, focused, and consistently surprising. A game that proves 100%ing does not always mean doing more, just doing it differently. Pillars of Eternity is where the modern CRPG revival truly found its footing. It is Obsidian's love letter to the Infinity Engine era, and while it wears those influences proudly, it also carves out its own identity. The lore is super dense, the mechanics are intimidating, and the depth of reactivity both in the world and your choices are seriously impressive. From a completionist standpoint, Pillars is incredibly rewarding. The world is handcrafted, side quests are meaningful, companion arcs, while more subtle than in later games, evolve in thoughtful ways. There's a real sense that your actions shape how the story lands. Even the final act, often a weakness in CRPGs, closes with weight. Combat is where the game takes time to open up. It's not friendly to newcomers. Engagement mechanics, poor rest abilities, and a dense spell system makes for a steep learning curve, but once you get it, it's excellent. Boss fights demand strategy, and builds feel distinct, and there's just enough room for creative problem solving. The achievement list supports deep exploration without forcing repetitive grind. The expansions, especially the White March, are tough but fair, and they add meaningful content to the overall arc. At number 5, Pillars of Eternity earns its place because it brings nearly everything together. Rich world building, solid mechanics, meaningful choices, and it respects the time you spend completing it. Divinity Original Sin 2 is a systems showcase, an RPG that encourages you to poke at every edge of its world just to see what breaks. And the wild thing is, almost nothing does. It's held together by deeply flexible mechanics, expressive writing, and one of the most replayable structures in the genre. Combat is outstanding. Every spell has synergy, every enemy can be exploited, every surface can be turned into a weapon. Whether you are teleporting enemies into lava, chaining together poison clouds and fireballs, or one-shotting bosses with a cheese build, the game constantly rewards creativity, and that's rare. From a completionist perspective, it's dense without being bloated. Each act is packed with optional content, but most of it is rich with story, character, or mechanical challenge. Companions have entire quest lines with branching outcomes. Dialogue choices matter. There are multiple endings, and there's a full tag system that changes how people react to you based on race, origin, or class. It's brilliant. The achievement list is well considered. You'll need multiple runs, but the game structure supports that. Replay value is quite high, and it's designed for it. You can't see everything in one go, and Original Sin 2 makes no apology for that. At number 4, Original Sin 2 is one of the most complete packages in the genre. As a pure 100% experience, it's generous, clever, and endlessly satisfying. Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous is a monstrosity. There is no other way to describe it. It is simply one of the most content-rich, mechanically dense, narratively ambitious CRPGs ever made. And for the type of player who wants to squeeze every single drop out of a game, every ending, every build, every moral fork, there's almost nothing that comes close. Let's start with mechanics. The character creation system is absurdly deep. Dozens of classes, subclasses, mythical paths, alignment options, companion synergies, and difficulty settings. Combat is complex and at times quite punishing. It demands build knowledge, it rewards long-term planning, and it gives you enough tools to break it wide open if you know how. Narrative reactivity is equally impressive. Mythic paths radically alter how the game unfolds, from quest lines to endings to how your companions view you. The writing ranges from epic to deeply personal, and while the pacing falters at times, the payoffs are huge. Major decisions carry weight, and entire regions change based on your morality. From a 100% standpoint, this is one of the most demanding games on the list. You will need multiple full playthroughs to see everything. Some achievements are easy to miss, others are locked behind specific builds or choices, but the sheer volume of content and the reward for completion is staggering. Wrath of the Righteous is overwhelming, brilliant, occasionally broken, and completely unforgettable. Baldur's Gate 3 is the most impressive modern CRPG ever made. It's bold, polished, reactive, and built from the ground up to support player expression. And most importantly for this list, it's a game that fully embraces what it means to be completed. This is not just a long game, it's a dense one. Every quest, dialogue branch, and companion storyline has multiple outcomes. Entire chunks of content are locked behind class choices, origin, or skill interactions. But it's not just about variety, it's about consequence. What you say and do matters across acts. Characters remember, the world changes, and the endings reflect everything you did to get there. Combat is exceptional. Larian's take on 5th edition D&D is deeply flexible, and fights scale beautifully with your growing knowledge of the systems. There is also room to experiment, to min-max, or to cheese your way through with creative use of surfaces, spells, and/or summons. And the game never punishes you for thinking outside of the box. 100% completing Baldur's Gate 3 was an enormous task. There are hundreds of achievements, dozens of mutually exclusive paths, and multiple origin characters that function as full campaigns of their own. But the thing is, it's worth it. Every replay, every side route, every missable moment, it all delivers. At number 2, BG3 is one of the most ambitious RPGs of its generation. And in my humble opinion, there is only one game that still stands taller. There's a reason Baldur's Gate 2 still sits at the top of many lists. And it's not nostalgia, it's craft, it's balance, it's structure. This is a game that respects your time, rewards curiosity, and challenges your decision making, and somehow still feels complete 20 years later. For a 100% completionist, it is almost perfect. Every companion is a full character arc. Some of them change depending on your choices, whereas others simply leave or die. Some even betray you. Questlines are sprawling but tightly written. Side content is everywhere, but it all feels authored. You are not just checking boxes, you're unraveling stories that truly matter. Combat is brutal and brilliant. This is where real time with pause hits its peak. Spells interact in complex ways. Bosses are smart. Encounters are designed to test how well you understand your party, not how quickly you can click. Building a team that can handle everything the game throws at you is one of the most satisfying challenges in the genre. What elevates it above everything else is pacing. Shadow of Arm delivers quality at every turn. The cities are dense, the dungeons are tight, the finale lands, the Throne of Baal expansion gives the story a powerful end cap, and it never wastes your time. Baldur's Gate 2 remains the high watermark, not just for classic RPGs, but for what the entire genre can be when every part of design works in harmony.